Hey, um, this this video is inspired by I have a guitar student, and he wants to learn guitar. He knows guitar, and I thought we both happen to like the Beatles, and so I said to him that. Sorry for the noise, I'm getting my coffee. I said to him that you probably could get a master's degree in music just from studying the Beatles. And so that is what inspired this video and hopefully many to come. And so I thought it would be good to go through the Beatles repertoire song by song. Maybe not every single song, but many of them, and just talk about the theory behind the songs and teach guitar and theory in the context of songs, and especially in the context of the Beatles, because they just have so much repertoire and they have so many songs, and actually quite a few of them are really foundational in terms of being harmonically very simple songs. And so I think it's a good exercise. And so I'm going to start with, do you want to know a secret? Let's do this a little bit. So let's just go part by part. So actually, this is interesting. So the intro is cool. It starts with an E minor. You'll never know how much I really loved you. You'll never know how much I really cared. So that's actually a really cool intro, because the song is not in E minor. It's in E major. But there is a chord borrowed from E minor that if it wasn't for that chord, at some point in the verse, they borrow an A minor chord from the E minor key. And so the intro is sort of almost like foreshadowing that they're going to borrow a chord from E minor, which I think is neat. Also, I like how the intro is kind of dark in a way. It's like, you'll never know how much I really. It actually reminds me of church music, but it's sort of like, you'll never know how much I really loved you. You'll never know how much I really care. Is very clever, because it's setting up that it's a secret in the first place, which is really very clever. And also the gravity, I guess probably what they're trying to get across is the gravity of that line is enhanced perhaps by putting it in a minor key. So once again, you'll never know how much I really love you. You'll never know how much I really cared. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on just in this one spot. I love it. So first thing is, it's an E minor, transposes to the relative major key. Don't worry, we're going to get to all that. But basically if you should know the modes. I'll pitch my course on the modes a million times. getyoursomeguitar.com/the modes or something like that. I'll put a link in. But you should know the modes, because the modes will teach you how to recognize what key you're in many cases, and it's kind of an easy way to do it. But the thing is that they go to the G, but then there's the inclusion of this F is I think most likely probably inspired by the melody. Yeah. So what I like about that F, and this is getting into a lot of modal stuff up front, and I'm trying to keep it basic, but this F is borrowed from the E minor, the Phrygian minor, and the Phrygian has a cool sound. And so they did something cool, interesting up front by having the intro of the song be in minor, kind of underlying the gravity of the first line of the song. And then they added more to it by actually implying the Phrygian up front, which even adds a little bit more, I want to say, just exotic flavor to it. But then they go to the 5 chord, B7, and then boom, we're into the song, but it goes to major. So the key is an E major. It's a great key for guitarists because this nice big E major chord is available. It's the lowest, root on a standard tuning guitar, and it's not a terribly difficult chord to play. But here's the progression, right? The intro progression. Actually, let me make sure I'm covering all the topics. I guess first thing is, this is an early song, so I want to go chronologically actually through. And I don't necessarily want to do every single song on every album, but this song in particular is great because E major is an accessible key for guitar, and it doesn't really transpose that much. I mean, the intro got a little complicated a little bit, but it only happens once, even though it might be the coolest part of the song. So the song is generally in the key of E. It transposes to the key of A during the bridge. We'll get to that. I consider the Beatles to be very musical, intuitive songwriters. I think a lot of what they write is sort of melody first. They strike me as the type of folks who, the type of folks like Paul McCartney and John Lennon, and of course George, in terms of the songwriters in the group. Very melodically focused, which is the way you should be if you're writing a song. But this song is on their, I believe, Please Please Me was their first record released. And there's a cool, I'm assuming it's available on Spotify as well, but there's a cool little mini doc attached to, I guess, like one of the versions of the album on streaming platforms. You can watch a little mini doc about it. It was all recorded. They would just play that club, whatever it is, the Cavern Club or something, and they just had all their music down, and they basically recorded the entire album in a day or 2 days or something. So features of this music is that it is pretty simple harmonically. It's also simple lyrically, right? It's pretty straightforward. And this harmony is very simple. It's right in the key. It's functional harmony. And so that's some of the features of this song, and probably a lot of their early writing, I think. So there's clear tonality. It mostly stays in one key. The intro's in a different key. It's in E minor. And then it transposes to A major in the bridge. It uses functional harmony. Functional harmony is basically like you have chords, they're in a key, and the chords want to do something, right? The chord E is the home base. It feels like you're home. When you go to A, it feels like motion. You're going somewhere, and then you get back to the E, and then you go to the B, and it really wants to go back to the E, right? So that's functional. The harmony is functional. It functions to provide direction or momentum or emotional emotional conveyance. This is functional harmony. Okay. The melody is very simple. It's just up and down the scale, pretty simple. And there's a couple of little tricks in here that create a little bit of contrast and give it. That's like you're sprinkling some extra seasoning on the dish when in the verse, instead of going, "Do you promise not to tell? To tell? Oh, closer." So that's an A minor, and it's the A minor that they borrowed from the E minor. So you're in E minor in the intro. You know how much I really love you. Right? Now, when you're in the key of E major, the 5 chord is usually major, and it wants to go back, right? And the 4 chord, right, also kind of wants to go back, but it's a little bit less, it's a gentler cadence. But the minor, when you have the 4 to the 1 in the A major chord, right, that's has one sound, but the minor, right, you can hear that there's one color, and then right at that switch it changes color. Whereas these, when you go to minor to minor, it feels to me, and this is how I describe it, but you may have you could look for the ways that feel intuitive to you. But for me, it's like these are 2 shades of the same color, or they're 2 shades in the same, they're part of the same palette, right? So they make sense together. So if you have a palette of, bold colors, right? Those go together, but they're part of the same palette of bold colors. Then you have this one that's almost like it's like a muted color, and then it brightens up, right? So they're, and this is the essence of functional harmony, right? These chords they serve a function. And where was I going with this? Right, so they borrow the one contrasting minor chord is borrowed from the minor key, and I think it adds just that little something extra that the song needs to make it stand out as being maybe starting as a very, very basic song, and then just giving it that one little bit of lift, or just adding that one little extra spice to the dish to make it better, in my opinion. So here's this song, key of E major. It is in E major. I think, and I'll pitch my modes course again. Modes are for me, a convenient way, and everything's laid out on the guitar very clearly to me in modes, give or take, but to me it's pretty clear. But knowing the modes and knowing how chords are built on top of the modes helps a lot with determining what key you're in. The song is in the key of E major. So if you have a mode, like if you have an E major scale, right? It's the scale everybody knows, right? Right? That's your major scale, okay? Ionian mode, as you would call it in modal theory. Now, if you lay the chords out, if you lay the scale out on one string, okay, you're going to notice that it's not a symmetrical scale, and this is actually one of the most important things probably to note about the major scale and why we even have functional harmony at all. is that it is not symmetrical. So there is a feeling, because it's not symmetrical, there's a feeling of a beginning and end because of the contour of the scale. There's a contour, right? You have the space here, but no space here. So there's only 1, 2, 3 notes before you get to the space. But here you have 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's the last space. So it's almost like, here's the way I kind of feels intuitive to me, is that you've set up this pattern, right, of space, space, and then no space. And then when you do it again, you've set up a pattern, but you're delaying the pattern, and that's what creates the expectation. So it goes space, space, no space, and then you say space, 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 no space. So it's very subtle in a way, but you can feel it. And this is the entire basis of functional harmony. Just simply the feeling of the scale and or the chords wanting to get to that note or wanting to get to that final chord. And of course, every chord, therefore, has its own function. But before we get into any of that and do the modes course, but if you look at the chords now laid out in the same format, where you're going, instead of playing just the notes, you're playing the entire chord. E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major, B major, C sharp minor, D sharp, diminished, and then finally you're back to E major. Okay? Now you'll notice additionally that not only are there spaces and no spaces in the scale, but there are, because of the way the scale is built, not every chord is the same, right? You have majors, you have minors, and you have that one diminished chord. And so this also creates a contour. Now you'll notice that this is all leading up to the song, because if you look at these couple of chords, just the first 3, now if we play the song, so now you're seeing that those chords are, without a doubt, in the key, right? When we look through the chords that are in the key, and technically you could just go, listen, do you want to know a secret? Do you promise not to tell? Oh, now, and actually, why don't I just play it like this? So they do put a passing chord in there, and that is exactly what it is. It's just a passing chord. So, right, it's just it's practically a lick, right? It's not, and that's all it is a passing chord. And it's helped by the fact that the second and the third chords in the key are minor. So you can just play another minor chord in between there to pass, and the notes all pass in sequence. There's no missing note in that sequence because they're right next to each other, and boom, it passes right down. Easy. Now if you play the song, play the chords in the key once again. Right? You can play the song, it's very cumbersome to do it, but you can go, listen, do you want to know a secret? Do you promise not to tell? Whoa, whoa. Now, if you remember, the fourth chord was a major chord. We'll play through them again. 1, 2, 3, 4. But in that one little spot, just to add a little spice to the song, they make that a minor chord. They're borrowing from the minor key. Do you want to know a secret? Do you promise not to tell? Whoa, whoa, oh, closer. See, so they take this 4 chord and change it to minor. And this is actually one of my favorite chord progressions. Just a really cool 4 minor going to the 1. I have a song that ends with a long vamp on that because it's just so satisfying. So those are the main chords to the song, and that's a quick modal way to analyze the song. So the key, and actually, here, what's the purpose of this all? Well, if you're just playing the song and you're just singing and playing, perhaps there's not a lot of reason to know what mode you're in. But if you want to improvise on the song, this happens to be a good song for modal improvisation, because there's a little more to it than just playing the scale up and down, of course, because certain chords in the scale that are contained in the mode require that you're careful about what notes you choose. But with a song like this that's pretty simple harmonically, I think most people can sound it out if you know the scales. So, and I recommend, and again, I have a modes course on this, but I recommend the 6 notes per string, 3 notes per string scale shapes. They're very handy for having good facility, but if you had somebody playing these chords, right? This is something that this is a chord progression that I think you could have a lot of fun just finding the notes that sound good. And as a matter of fact, the first note in this whole song is B, which is the 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? That's the first note in the melody. And as a matter of fact, the 5 is a good, in this particular progression, in many progressions actually that are modally anchored like this, the 5 is a great note to just sort of use as an anchor. So you can anchor on that 5, but simply play the notes in the key, and you'll be okay. And I think that most guitarists who are learning the modes could put this into a looper, or have a friend play the progression, and just knowing the scales, spend some time and just knowing the notes in the scales, learn the shapes of the scales, and then just spend time looking for the melodies that you like, and you'll probably start to notice that there are a lot of things that your favorite guitar players play that are in those scales to begin with. So I think that you'd be very successful as an improviser if you took that route. So it's more pitching for modes and modal theory, but I'm a big fan of modes actually. So So the E major scale is the foundation of this whole entire song. It's a song that is consistent with the mode of E Ionian. All the songs, all the chords, almost all the chords fit into the key, and the scale can be used very effectively to improvise over the main verse chord progression. So moving on. So we touched on this a little bit, but there's a way to analyze. So now when you think about modal theory, you start to realize that, or let's say not, you don't start to realize. Someone did, and they named the chords, and they actually gave chords numbers for each scale degree, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Simple. So this song, in terms of Roman numeral theory, which is what they use Roman numerals to number each chord, you have the 1, the 3, 2, 5, or 1, 3, 2, 5, right? And this is a very common way to analyze songs, and it's a useful shorthand, but also, of course, when you're thinking of functional harmony, then you know that each one of those numbers is not just a number, but it represents a chord, and each chord has a function. So in this song, and this is how I like to think about it, but actually, if you have an E major chord, which is the 1, and you go to the 3, first of all, let's just listen to that. And that's a chord change. It's a minor chord. Now, it's not the relative minor of the key, but, you know, to be honest, I love 1 going to the 3, but to me, in a sense, the 3 it's not the relative minor of E major, but to me it is a relative minor. This is blasphemy. But if you look at, if you know you're caged, I don't think I'll ever do, maybe I will, I don't know, do a video on caged, but you can find a million. Basically, the idea is that you can visualize the guitar neck based upon the typical shapes of guitar chords. And if you have a C chord, that's the first letter in caged, C, right? Now, if you find the E that belongs to that shape, it's here. Oops, if I can play it correctly. Right? So this is basically the C shape moved up so that E is the root. Now, if you look at this E major shape and you change one note, the E, you move it down to a D sharp. There's 2 E's in this chord, here and here. If you move this E down and you move this E down, that's your G sharp minor. So these chords share 2 notes, and to me, they are almost like 2 versions of the same chord. And so this progression, in a sense, it is a progression, but to me it's almost as if it's not a progression, but rather just taking this one chord and almost making it, just bringing the root down 1. And I would be curious to know, maybe take some time yourself and reflect on what you think that chord progression feels like to you. I honestly wish I had spent more time thinking about it myself, but So I could come up with something, but that'll be homework for me. So the first chord progression in the song is to the G sharp minor, which is I hate saying that it is it's not the relative minor, but it's sort of like it's a related minor to the E major. And then it goes down to F sharp minor. And the F sharp minor is the subdominant, but it's also, is it the subdominant? Oh, forget, you know what? If you look at the key, again, the same way. The relationship between this F sharp minor and this A, and this is what's beautiful about the guitar, is that you can now see the relationship, right? Here's the notes for this chord, F sharp minor. Take away this note, and then you have an A in first inversion. So basically all these chords are related in this way. And actually, reason stands that if you only have 7 notes and chords are built in thirds, which I hadn't covered that, but let's just assume everyone knows that already. If chords are built on thirds, then, which is basically alternating notes in the scale, then the 1 and the 3 are related by 2 notes, the 2 and the 4 are related by 2 notes, and so on and so forth. So F sharp minor is the 2 chord, and you may have heard phrase the 1-4-5, right? 1-4-5 is a very interesting chord progression, because if you take the 4 and the 5, incidentally, twist and shout is 1-4-5. Right? If you take a 1-4-5 progression, this is also a little bit theory heavy, but I'm trying not to be theory heavy, but if you take chords, and I guess there's no way around this. Basically, chords are 3 notes, right? Standard chords, as you hear them, they're referred to as triads, and they're triads because they're built on 3 notes, and the 3 notes are alternating within the scale. So if you have a 1 chord, the 1 chord is comprised of the 1, the 3, and the 5. So you skip over the 2 and the 4. And if you play it in arpeggiated form, you can sort of hear, let's see how I can demonstrate this. So here's the scale. Right, now here's the chord in arpeggiated form. In other words, the notes played one at a time. So you're skipping over, skip, skip. And this is a sound you've heard a million times. That's the E major chord arpeggiated. Now, if you can't play this note and this note at the same time, because they're on the same string, and that's not how the guitar works. So if you find all the notes that are in the E major chord in open strings, it ends up being this. So I was going to discuss an interesting feature of the 1-4-5. And this is actually an interesting feature of any 2 chords that are next to each other in any key. And it just so happens that the 4 and the 5 have almost every note you need to actually, technically, they have every note you need to define the key. And here's another thing. So this is actually really important. Knowing what key you're in has a lot to do with recognizing where the chords fall in the key. And describing it very plainly is that if you're in the key of E major, which we are, right, you have this chord here and you have this chord here. It's one step away. It's a whole step away. It's not here because this would be a different key. So actually that would be, let me think, would that be a key at all? No. So knowing how the chords fall in the key is part of how you find what key you're in. So knowing that in the key of E, let's just talk about the contours. This is basically a modes lesson, and also a functional harmony lesson. I should have remembered. I haven't taken a music theory course in 25 years. So I can't remember all the technical terms. And they're important so you know the names of things, but really, the idea that theory is not music is actually very true. Theory is something that we try to invent to describe what music is, but music in fact is an audio, and I don't know if that's even a word, but it's an acoustic phenomenon, and the theory does its best to describe, but it doesn't really do it justice in most cases. But so if you have the major scale, right? Once again, we're back to the basics again, major scale, and you'll notice that there's a major chord here, and then you go up 2 frets, and there's a minor chord, and then you go up 2 frets, and there's another minor chord. Now, that's the only time this happens, right? In every major key, you go up 2 frets, you get a minor chord, you go up another 2 frets and get another minor chord. So if you ever have 2 chords next to each other that are minor, that are 1 fret apart, you don't necessarily know the mode, because what feels home in the moment is the mode, but you know the collection of pitches. So if you ever see the F sharp and the G sharp together like this, you know you're going to pick notes from the E major scale. Now, most likely, here's an example. So if you have this chord progression, you're in Dorian. So you're not in the E Ionian anymore. You're in D Dorian. I'm sorry, E Ionian. You're in F sharp Dorian, but you're not playing in E Ionian. You're thinking Dorian, or maybe you're not thinking at all. You want to play the sounds of F sharp Dorian. Did I say D Dorian again? So D Dorian is the most common key, so everybody says D Dorian. F sharp Dorian. So when you have these 2 chords together, right? You're playing in F sharp, but the notes are the E major notes. So right? Now, if somebody was playing this, now you're playing in Phrygian. So, and these are the same notes as E major, right? But you're implying a different home base. And so you're technically playing in a different key, but it's a modal key. You're playing in Phrygian. So, but at least you know the notes, right? You know that it's E major because no other mode of the major scale has 2 minor chords next to each other. Likewise, here's where it gets interesting. Likewise, there are no keys that have a minor chord like this, modes of the major scale, that is, and a major chord right next to it, like this, right? One fret apart. So you know you're still in the note collection of E major, but you're in most likely either you're most likely in G sharp Phrygian or A Lydian, right? Depending on the implied home base of that chord progression. And just like I showed you before, you can, just by sitting on the chord longer or having a bass note that's sort of pedaling or focusing on that, you can play the chords lots of different ways, but you're implying this home base of one of these notes. Then you know you're going to use the same notes as E major. This is a modes lesson. Same notes as E major, but you're going to be implying the root of the scale, or you're implying the home base feeling is actually either the G sharp or the A natural. And so likewise, the contour of this scale and the contour of where the chords lie, same theory applies, that A and B, two major chords, are next to each, let's say not next to each other, but they're one fret apart. That also doesn't occur and those are always the 4 and the 5 of the key. Now, whether you're in the key of the 1 or the 4 or the 5 depends, because the progression could go. And you're really going to be implying more of a Phrygian sort of sound there. But if you're playing, now you're playing the minor. You're playing C sharp minor, which is the relative minor of the key. And so, or you could be playing something like now you're playing an A, but because these chords are next to each other in this pattern, you're really implying A Lydian. And so you're playing, even though you're playing the same notes as E major, you're playing them in a way that sounds like you're playing in the A key. And so, but each of these scales has its own, this is, just go take the modes course. But each one of these scales has its own sound. And the point I was getting to with this is that these progressions, like the A going to the E, I believe that's called a plagal cadence, has its own sound. And this is, I don't know, this is the main cadence. I don't know what it's called. Shit, I should have done more homework before this. Anyway, that has its own sound. But knowing where all the chords sit in the key is key, pun intended, to figuring out what key you're in. And so let's go to, let's talk about this one off chord. So you're in the key of E, right? And then we have this A minor chord. So some of you might say, oh, how do you, there are a lot of keys, you might ask hypothetically, there are a lot of keys with an A minor chord in them. How do you know you're borrowing from E minor and you're not borrowing from actually, how do you know you're borrowing from, well, I mean, there's F. Doesn't matter. There's a lot of chord. There's a lot of keys with the A minor chord in it. There's 3. One of them is E minor or G major. So how do you know? The first way you know is because you're already in E major. So sometimes the answer, it's Occam's razor, right? Sometimes the answer is simply that it's the simplest solution. The other, I guess, way to sort of know is by listening, playing the notes in the scale. If you're watching this, and if you're a beginner, I don't think anybody who's advanced would be watching this at all. And if any beginners are not totally bored by now, if you're a beginner, one way to tell would be just to play the notes in the scale to figure out which key you could possibly be in. The simplest answer, of course, is that borrowing from the parallel minor key, you already know you're in E. So the simplest answer is to borrow from the closest key. So E minor would be, perhaps not technically the closest key in terms of the notes, common notes, but it is the key that has the same home base, and the gravity of that home base is very strong. And so borrowing from the E minor to go back to E major is the most logical answer. But also, you can sort of do a little exercise for yourself by saying, well, here's the scale. Right, here's the scale for E major. And if you go to play E minor, right? And what you're finding here you're finding the notes that make the most sense. Now, here's more like modal wonkiness, but there's three different types of minor. There's Aeolian, Phrygian, and Dorian. And it so happens that if you were, and Dorian happens to be the second mode, and it's in G major, and G major is the relative major to E minor, so it is technically the closest in terms of matching notes. But there's one feature in Dorian that makes it the most likely choice, and that's the raised sixth of the key. So here's what Dorian sounds like. Right? And that sounds good because right? There's another scale you can use, but it's more of a jazz scale. But the Dorian mode has this raised sixth. But if you used any other mode, you'd have a minor sixth, minor sixth. And so it would sound like this. And that really just jumps out and sounds awful. So this is another way modal theory is helpful. So all that is to say that, yes, it is A minor borrowed from the E minor, which is a parallel minor. Okay. So it's a color moment, it's an introspective moment perhaps, but it relates back to E major because that A minor resolves to E minor naturally, so it also resolves to the E major somewhat naturally, except you have that sort of color change to it. So great thing about this song, so we're still talking about Do You Want to Know a Secret? I want to talk about, we're getting long here, and I want to talk about the bridge, which goes, let me whisper in your ear Say the words you long to hear. I'm in love with you. Ooh. Actually, we should talk about that. So, we'll get to the relative minor now. So here's the same sort of caged analysis. It goes to, we've already seen the F sharp minor chord. So it goes, ooh. Actually, it goes back to I think it goes back to the C sharp. No, it goes to the B7 and starts the verse again. So it goes, I'm in love with you. Ooh. Listen, right? So, but it goes to this C sharp minor. Now, C sharp minor is the relative minor to E major. Now, looking at this chord, you should probably already see that we talked about this caged and they talked about the C shape. And if you look at if you look at the C shape of E, which is here's E major, but in the C shape. So it's like moving this C shape. If you play it with these, and then your finger becomes the nut. E major, right? If you take this note and move it to this, and move this one, you basically just moved the E to a C sharp, and you have the same chord, right? Now, there's a reason why this is called the relative minor. In my opinion, there's two reasons. Number one is that they sound most similar. Like this literally sounds like a minor version of this. Right? So that's your relative minor in E major. And in many ways, you can play over them as if they're the same chord, which is a beautiful thing. And that's also, I think, in my mind, why they're the relative minor. So we'll do one more little modal lesson. So when you play your E major scale, right? Really, if you're playing over E major, there's really kind of, to me, every single note sounds good. You either have a chord tone or a color tone or an avoid note. And it so happens that in E, let's listen to each note. Here's E. Here's D sharp. That sounds beautiful, sounds sweet. Here's C sharp. That sounds beautiful too. Here's B. Now here's A. That one is sort of like, ooh, wait, hang on a second. It doesn't sound bad, but it sounds like it wants to go. Or likewise. And I apologize to anyone who heard resolving down to the third before resolving up to the fifth. But that fourth, so here's E. So the moral of the story is that every note sounds good. At least it does to me, except for the A. So when you play this E major scale over an E, pretty much any note is going to sound good. Like here's E major. Here's an E major chord with the D sharp. That's a major seventh chord. Here's with the C sharp. That's a major sixth chord. Obviously, the fifth is going to sound fine, but when you play the fourth, it's actually called a suspended chord because it feels like there's suspense because it wants to resolve. So when you play this E major scale, there's really only one avoid note. And so playing the third obviously is already in the chord, and playing the 2 sounds beautiful, even if you play the 2 and the 3 both at the same time. If you put both the 2 and the 3 in there, it plays a 9 chord, and those are beautiful too. So every note sounds good and consonant with the harmony, or beautiful, or color, or poignant, or whatever, except for that 4. And the same goes, actually, by the way, so there's 7 notes in a scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a lot of people play what's called a hexatonic scale. They just leave that note out. Right? I don't, but people do. And it's a good shorthand. It adds more. It's more than your pentatonic scale. Pentatonic's only 5. You have that one added note. And it's a little bit more colorful, but you don't even have to worry about landing on any note. You can land on any note with confidence if you play the hexatonic scale. If you're playing in Ionian or Aeolian. and so the same rule applies for this minor chord, right? Where to me every note sounds good except for what's the 4 on the major chord is actually the 6th, the flat 6th, and I'm not even sure. Oh, actually, I guess you can play it like this. It doesn't sound. Let me see if I can play it. Yeah, you can play it like this. It just does not sound good, and you shouldn't be surprised because this is the relative minor, and so the relative minor to the E is almost like it's not even it's a different chord, but it's almost like E on a different day. It's like E was feeling happy yesterday, but today E is feeling a little bit more mellow, or maybe a little sad, or whatever. C sharp minor, right? This is the relative minor. They're practically the same chord, and you can basically play on them the same way because of that rule about avoiding the 4th, or as it were, avoiding the 6th, the flat 6th over the C sharp minor. And so just to complete the theory lesson, at the end of every verse, say the words you long to hear. I'm in love with you. So actually, he tells this. He's all happy because he's got a secret to tell. But when he finally tells the secret, there's a build. The build, and then you could go, I'm in love with you, but instead he goes, I'm in love with you. Woo. So it's really a secret. And it sounds like a secret because it's in C sharp minor. Okay, so that's the end of the verse. A quick transition or transposition to the relative minor, right? So which is not much of a transition at all. Back to E for every verse. Now the bridge is also a transposition. So you have to be able to play, let's say you were improvising on this, you're playing in 2 different keys. So, and this is a typical thing in pretty much all music, is transposing to the key up a 4th. So if you're in the key of E, now you've heard this a million times. Known a secret for, right? It doesn't actually transpose that. It skips the actual cadence. It just blasts right into the key of A. But in this case, we're in the key of A, and we're going to do the same modal demonstration. So it goes, I'm known a secret for the week or 2. So transposing to the key of A up a 4th, there are technical reasons for doing this. There's only one note difference from E major. It's a very common, let's say, trope in music, right? I mean, the whole blues is based upon transposing to the key of the 4, because a blues is like, it just goes, I mean, a lot of it just goes 1 4 1 4, but in the blues you are transposing. Each one is its own key, even though it's not Ionian, it's a different mode, but in this case, but it's up a fourth. And like I demonstrated before, if you land on that 1 chord, if you go, right, you're transposing up a fourth, and that's very, very common. So they do that here. And the fact that there's only 1 note differences makes it not a bridge too far, let's say. It's an easy transposition. So the only difference is the note D, and they highlight it by going, I've known a secret for the week or 2. And you'll notice that if you look at the chords in the key, right, we know A is in E. We just covered the fact that C sharp minor is in E. It's the relative minor to E. We covered the fact that F sharp is the 2 chord in E major. And in E, we have B major, right, because we did this whole exercise. But in this case, there's another, they use the minor. Now, we covered this before. If you have, so here's the progression for the bridge. I've known a secret for the week or 2, right? And this is B minor and C sharp minor, okay? And because we covered this before, you'll know that there's only 1 mode choice. Let me say it a different way. There's only 1 pitch collection choice when you have 2 minor chords in a song like this that are right next to each other, right? 1 step apart. And they are the 2 and the 3 chord in whatever key you're in. So in this case, it's A. And it happens to be an A because we start in, I've known a secret for a week or 2. Nobody, right? So we know that we're in the key of A. Now, we also know we're in the key of A because it starts in A, and that's a simple dead giveaway, right? If it starts in A and it goes back down to A, then you know your home base is A, so that's how you know you're in A. Ionian for the moment, just in the bridge part. But you could use other musical cues to figure out if you're not in that mode, right? Like basically, it could be in any mode of the A major scale, and there's obviously 7 of those. But in this case, it's transposition to A major. So, and here's how you get back to E major. I've known a secret for... Oh, I'm sorry, I'm playing it wrong. I've known a secret for the week or 2. It actually almost practically works either way. Nobody knows it, just we two. Right? And so, this is actually maybe, so I'm hiding this 1 quick lesson deep into this video, over an hour into the video. But so you talk a lot about theory and there's a lot of theory to talk about, but music is funny. It's like not a theoretical phenomenon. It is a physical phenomenon. It exists in the physical world. And a good way guitarists have a lucky thing because we see our strings and we can see this string is thinner than this one. And in a sense, the notes down here are fatter. They technically are a longer wavelength. They take up space in a different way. We can't see it with our eyes, but guitarists can also see it with our eyes because this one string is capable of producing lots of different notes. But the fact of the matter is that this E and this F are this far apart, right? But this E and this F, they're a hell of a lot closer together, right? But they're the same note, but they're not the same note. And so for all guitarists, this should actually wake you up. When you look at the guitar and you think about theory and you think, oh, I just need to play an A chord, an F sharp chord, and never mind the fact that I was playing the wrong chords a minute ago. The physical properties of this music are more important than the theory, any theory that I've told you. It's interesting and it's cool to know, but and this is a lesson for me, so I'm practically talking to myself. The way it sounds is the most important thing, right? There's a reason why heavy metal guitarists, buy longer scale length guitars and then put thicker strings and then tune down to C, D standard or drop C or something, right? Because there's a difference between a low C. There's a difference between this E and a D. Right? Right? I mean, actually, you can even hear the difference just by how you have to tune up to it. There's distance there, but there's less distance somehow here. Right? Actually, technically this is not true because look at this. Where am I playing? E, F, E, F, E, F. Isn't this fascinating? I'm disproving my own point. The point is that the physicality of it matters. The sound of it matters a lot more. And so this transition from E I've noticed. So do you hear that transition? That first of all, it's a super common transition, so it should be, burned into your subconscious somewhat. But there's also, ooh, I've known a secret, right? There's a lift there. That lift from the key of E to A, or in this case, C sharp minor to A, that lift is the same lift you're getting in the actual chord progression. So the function of those transitions is the same. It's just that when it's happening, I wish it did happen. Well, actually, here's an interesting thing about the song. I'm in love with you. So that A, beautifully, as a matter of fact, doesn't really appear much in the song. So it does feel like a genuine transition. It only appears in this little tag at the end of the verse before the transition to C sharp minor, the relative minor, as sort of a build-up to it. So it's almost like a mini bridge. It's a build-up, literally a build-up to, but then it goes back, right? And so that transition is an amazing demonstration of functional harmony, because you're in the key of E, you so want to go to the key of E, and you're on the B, which is the one that most wants to go to E, and boom, you fool everyone, you go to A. You let people hear A moment ago because you just used it in the build-up, and you haven't, even though you're in the key of E and it's a prominent chord in the key of E, it is more of a departure. When people talk about functional harmony, they talk about A as almost being like a movement away from home. So when you're at home, this is a movement away from home because, like we said, like these chords have a lot of common notes. But if you move to, you're not really moving away from home. It's almost like you're still at home, but you're in a different room of the house. Right? You're still at home. You're just in a different room of the house. But now you want to move away from home a little bit. Now it's like almost like you walked out the door. In that once you hit that F sharp minor chord, it's almost like you walked out the door. But that's like you got to the bus stop, like you got farther. And then when you get here, it's almost like you got as far as you could go. And now you just turned around, you're looking back home. And this is like functional harmony. So when you get to the bridge of this song and you get to the A, it's like boom. You know, like, oh shit, we really left the house. No, a secret for the week or two. But this is what I was getting to. Nobody knows, nobody knows, just we two. Right? And the fact that you can play this B chord here, I mean, it's not anything fancy. It's not anything theory related. It's literally your ear's memory. You've heard this song, you've heard this chord a million times throughout the course of this song. So, and this melody works the same way. You can be playing a regular melody and start playing a weird note. And then the first time people hear that weird note, they start thinking, oh, that's a weird note. But then as the song goes on, you can completely normalize a weird note and play in the wrong key, in the entire wrong key. And so it's not really about like what's technically correct. It's really more about what is expected or not expected. All right. So, we've really beat this song to death here. I guess one last thing is that this cadence here, we talked about this a little bit, but when you go 4, 5, this is your main cadence in the key of E. It's the 4 to the 5 to the 1, right? You go away from home. You've gone as far as you can go, and now you're like, oh, I just realized how far away I got from home. Now I got to go back home. But likewise, you can do these, right? We already know, right? So this is just simply going to the relative minor, and it is almost just like going back to your E. Because there are two notes that are common, but it's just mellower. But let's try this one. Oh, I'm sorry. That one's interesting. So that one, I sort of expected it to be almost like it was going home, but it's not. And here's probably why. And this is what theory is all about. Theory is not about what the answer is, but what does it sound like? And then how can we name it so that we remember that the sound serves a purpose? Well, this is a sound. In a way, because this chord and this chord have so many notes in common, to me, it feels like you started to go home, but you're like backtracking. Now, and this is very similar to it's almost like the minor version of the 5-1. Okay, I think I'm done. I don't know if you got anything out of this. Tell me if you did. Tell me if you didn't. Tell me if tell me if you completely disagreed with anything. Tell me if you want me to do more of these. I guess there's a lot that I didn't cover. Actually, let's just keep going for a sec here. So I'm just going to cover my bullet points that I just wanted to cover. So melody is interesting. So guitar is awesome for this reason, because you can sort of picture where things are on the guitar neck by going. So here's the first melody. Right? That's called an appoggiatura, which is actually a term that I finally do remember from my music theory days, but basically means you're landing on a chord, a note that's not in the chord, but you're popping off of it real quick. So it's like, this is not a bad, it's the 6 down to the 5 is not a, you could sit on the 6 and listen to that. It sounds great. But in this case, they go to the 5 because it's a pop song. Now, when you get to this one, you're on this chord, and the melody note is literally the root of the chord. Now, if you're playing this version of the B, you can see that we're going 2-5-1, which is actually a jazz progression, a common jazz progression, and you start on the root. Can't play it that way. Hold on. The melody adheres pretty strongly to the chords being played, and that's actually a feature of, to some degree, good songwriting, but also good simple songwriting or pop songwriting. This is a very easy melody to sing. It's simple. It's scalar, right? So these modes, the Ionian mode is the basis of all harmonic Western music, and it's also probably, there's a reason that it exists. It's because of the harmonic series and all this other crap, but it's also something that's been embedded in our subconscious, because every song you've ever heard that's a Western song, so all these different genres are also just based on these 7 notes: funk, jazz, classical, rock, blues, R&B, disco, like you name it, harmonic music. I was going to say techno, but a lot of times techno and even hip hop can be sort of atonal because of samples, and sometimes they don't match and blah, blah, blah. But a lot of times it's sampled from harmonic music. So a lot of times it is harmonic, which means that the mode, this major mode, is the basis of the melodic structure. And all of our expectations about where the melody starts and ends is based upon this just repetition of having heard this scale in all of its forms just over and over and over again in every song, practically every song you've ever heard, over and over and over again, right? So, and this is a super simple example of, you go right to the 5, which is a very, very strong note in this chord, and then you get to the 2, and you start on the root note of the 2, and then you're going to a B7 chord, and you're landing on the 7, and you're going up the B7 chord. So 7, flat 7 technically, flat 7, 1, I could play it here, 2, 3, and then you're back to, right? So it's a very simple scalar melody that is easy to sing, easy to hear because it's right up the scale. It features a strong note in the chord repeatedly. and the notes pretty much land on the chords in a strong way. Like that's literally the root of the F sharp chord. And the F sharp is a departure in a way because it's related to the 4, and the 4 is the departure. And so starting the melody on the root of that chord is a strong choice because it is the departure. This is technically an appoggiatura, so it's just like a quick term, like landing on a non-chord turn and chord turn and tone on the strong beat and then coming off it quickly. So I talked about the chords, non-chord tones create tension, chords, melody working together. I'm not going to teach any of the actual chords, but you could play this song like this. Listen, do you want to know a secret? Do you promise not to tell? Oh, 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 closer. Let me whisper in your... Right, you could play different chord shapes, etc. Okay, it's a very harmonically simple song, pretty simple song from a chordal standpoint, pretty simple song from a lyrical standpoint. So you could spruce this song up a lot just by feel, right? And that's something we didn't talk about at all, but you can play this song in lots of different ways and I think there's a lot more. This actually goes into my earlier comment about how music is really very much about sound. You'd be surprised, and this is kind of something you should experiment with, but if there's a song you really like, or even more interesting, a song you don't like, where if someone played it, you'd be surprised if someone played it, like for instance, it was a pop song and it was kind of like boring maybe to you or a little bit vapid or didn't seem deep to you, but you put it in a context that sounds deeper. Let's say it's like a solo piano and voice. This is just an example. More intimate execution or presentation of the material. I have been, let's just say, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but I have been surprised by how much the presentation of the music, which goes back to the point that the actual sound is what actually makes the biggest difference in the way music sounds, and you can make something that's not very interesting sound very interesting and add a lot to it just by the presentation of it. And so a song like this that's pretty simple, and I don't know, my dream would be to not just teach each song and do a deep dive of each song, but also put them into my repertoire. But a song like this is sort of like it doesn't speak to me that strongly, but I think that a challenge for me would be to come up with an arrangement that puts the content in a light that makes it interesting. That's my homework. That's my homework assignment. So that was a point that I had written down. Strumming and phrasing affect the emotional meaning. You can play the same chords in a different way. Never mind the idea that you can actually do reharmonizations, create a different effect. And just the fact that early Beatles songs especially, but not really just early Beatles songs, but many Beatles songs are similar in this way. They have very clear, the writing is very clear. The key centers are clear. They use functional harmony, which is like a very foundational thing. The melodies are pretty clear, and that's it. Okay, so that was a really long lesson. I don't know if this was of value to you at all. Hopefully it was. If it wasn't, let me know in what ways it wasn't valuable. That would be a curiosity for me, and I'll try to do better next time.